and especially with Iran. And you tell Iran to back off. You know, my experience with Iran in the last administration, and President Trump kind of proved it when he went after Soleimani and then we went after Baghdadi with ISIS, is you punch them in the nose real hard, they kind of stand back and say, well, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. And that's what our president needs to tell them right now. Don't you get involved. This is a fight that Israel can handle with Hamas and pivot to Hezbollah if they need to, but give them the support they need. So it's not only a fight in a military fight, it's a political fight, a diplomatic fight, and it's going to be an economic fight as well. Because remember, this administration gave Hamas and Palestinian Authority over $250 million. We took all that away from them in the last administration. And then they get all this money as well in energy support to Iran. You can't normalize relations.
Good morning. This is Seraphin Hanish, the American in Exile, coming to you from Moscow on October 16th, 2023. Today is Monday. I welcome you again to my disordered studio. Since this is a family house, we've got, you'll hear a little bit of babies in the background and stuff, and a little bit of the chaos that comes with running a home with two kids in a small apartment in Moscow. So get used to it, folks. I think this is going to be what you see for a while. But I wanted to come to you with this message, with this video, because things are developing that I think need to be discussed. As you may be aware, Israel has massed a lot of forces on the edge of the border of the Gaza Strip. And in particular, Fox News is all about this idea that Israel needs to go in and just wipe Hamas off the face of the planet and do all of this stuff. And, you know, get ready, folks, because you're going to see a spectacle like you've never seen before. It's going to be great. They've got, you know, I've been scanning around on YouTube and I see cameras set up in several Israeli cities and also in Gaza showing, you know, watch it happen for yourself. It's like watching a movie. And if you think about it, it's kind of voyeuristic that we can go and watch this activity as people are being shelled out of existence. And, ooh, look at the fiery rockets go into the air. And I won't deny it. I've seen the same thing and watched it and with some fascination. But it's not really that good because I'm watching the business of death being dealt. Rightly or not, it's still being dealt, and that gives me pause. You know, yes, the commandment does not say thou shalt not kill. It says thou shalt not commit murder. A lot of people don't know that, but that's the reason why we part of the reason why the Ten Commandments were given, and yet Israel of old spent a lot of its time annihilating people in the territories that it took when it came back into the Promised Land. This is an interesting point because what we are dealing with now is largely a delusional, illusional set of image throwing that is going on behalf of at least part of the American press, namely Fox News. If you look at the website, which is the way I see it, I don't have access in Moscow to the Fox News live services. I guess I could do that if I wanted to pay for it, but I don't want to pay for it, and so I rely on YouTube for video clips, and I rely on the website. Sometimes VPNing into it so that I can be inside America. So that I can see what they are saying. And basically what we have is sort of, don't like to use labels, I wanted to say neocon fest, but it's kind of like the manifestation of the entire narrative that I grew up with in my life regarding the relationship of the United States with the state of Israel. And that is, we must support the Jewish state at all times, and because supporting the Jewish state is right. And I want to get into a little bit of what the idea for that is. Now, a lot of people probably already know this, but maybe you know it, but don't really realize that you know it. So I want to point it out. When I was a child, and I used to hear about all of these actions taken to support Israel, the understanding that was instilled in me, directly or indirectly, was this: Israel is the nation where the Jewish people live. The Jewish people are the chosen people of God. So, therefore, helping them helps us, because if we help Israel do what it needs to do to exist, we are on God's side, and that's good for us. That's how I was kind of brought into the idea. And I had this thinking all the way up until a little while after I was baptized into the Eastern Orthodox Church. And it just so happened that I was baptized in a Palestinian community in the United States. And slowly, they began to show me some of the imagery and pictures of what the Israeli Defense Forces were actually doing to people, not only to Muslims, but to Christians. And I saw this echoed not only with, a church that would obviously have a side to play in this as a group of Palestinians, Lebanese, and Syrians, but in discussing the same matter with people in the Russian sphere in the United States, though Americans, but influenced by the Russian Orthodox Church. Um, one of the wonderful people there said it this way. They said, the Israelis are not very nice. And then they talked about more how they uh, have often given Orthodox Christian believers a fair amount of trouble in Jerusalem, even though the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, one of our, probably one of the holiest sites that we have, because that's where Christ's tomb actually is, and that's where the Holy Fire occurs every year. Um, it's a major, major Orthodox Christian site, and sometimes the Israeli government gives us a little bit of trouble over it, gives our believers trouble over it. And there are reports on Telegram that I've seen even in the last week or so about how some of the religious elements in Israel are trying to bring about the rebuilding of the third temple. They're trying to get red heifers. I don't know the theology behind the red heifer in particular. Perhaps somebody who is deeply involved in Judaism can give a really full explanation of it. I've only heard references to it, but not anything in detail, and it's not in our canon of Scripture. So I'd rather defer to somebody who really knows this idea to discuss, and I welcome that. So if anybody knows, please contact me in comments or post a video or something so that we can offer this information. Anyway, there is religious activity in Israel on the part of some of these people that seems to be designed to try to trigger the coming of for Protestant believers, they think it's going to trigger the second coming of Christ. For Orthodox believers that are involved in this bit of news tracking, they see it as the inauguration of the reign of the Antichrist. Okay, because the Antichrist is supposed to come when the third temple is built. He will be liked and loved by everybody, and he will eventually go into the temple and sit on the throne as God and demand that he be worshipped as God. And so I'm an Orthodox Christian. I don't know how. I hope that what I am saying is not in any way an affront to God or to his church, but I'm going to say something that I believe is true based on what our Lord Christ has said to us, Jesus Christ has said to us. He told his disciples very specifically, do not try to speculate about the end times. He said, many people will say, here is Christ or there is Christ, and do not believe them, is what he said. He said, when the coming happens, it will be like lightning flashes from the east and into the west. It will be known everywhere. And a lot of this stuff that I see being reported is kind of like two sides of the same coin. Like both sides are trying. The argument is like somebody's trying to bring this about as if we actually had control over it. Now they may bring it about. spiritual and mundane things coalesce. They certainly do. But um, the idea that I'm a little resistant to the idea that we can sort of just mechanically manifest this stuff. I don't think we're in the times of the Antichrist yet because there isn't any figure in the world that everybody really loves. There seems to be a lot of dissension about pretty much anybody, whether you like President Trump, President Putin, imposter Biden, as I like to call him, or anybody else. Uh, there are certainly a number of people that dislike these same people. And if you dislike certain people really intensely, then there are a certain number of people who really like those self same people. So the time of the Antichrist does not appear to be now. It might be soon. It might be absolutely triggered by all of this kind of strife. Maybe that's the cracking point. But in any case, as a Christian, we're not supposed to really be paying attention to speculation about the future. We're supposed to be paying attention to ourselves. And if we pay attention to ourselves and the salvation of our own souls, then maybe when this stuff comes to pass, we will be prepared to resist it. Okay? So that's bit A of theology. You might get more, who knows? So let's go a little bit further. So, anyway, this unconditional support of Israel in the United States is based deeply in a Protestant idea that the Jewish people will rebuild the third temple and that it will trigger the second coming of Christ, which is seen by many Protestants, I think, as a sort of get out of jail free card. If you can make it happen sooner, then we get to escape this worldly prison and go to heaven. As you know, I loved my Protestant friends greatly, and I hope wherever they are doing really well. Vanessa Winters, Esther Carmichael, um, and so many of the others, wonderful guys that were and girls that were um, real stepping stones on my way into the Orthodox Christian faith. I loved them for their sincerity, and I hope that they are doing well wherever they are. However, I remember the wish of one of them saying, "I just want to go to heaven." Well, maybe my friend was way, way ahead of me on the spiritual curve, and maybe she still is. Um, I understand that, but one of the thoughts I had even at that time is, how does that help us deal with now? And in Orthodox Christianity, we are actually taught to understand that the kingdom of God is here and now. It's with us, and we can experience it if we want to at any time, no matter what's going on. And so the challenge really is not about what happens in the future, it's what happens here, right now, with me. So, bit two, right? All right, so let's go to this whole thing. This eschatological idea that is behind the general sense of what is being pressed on Fox News, particularly that we must support Israel in eradicating Hamas because they are killing Jews, and the recent politicizing of this, where Senator Marco Rubio suggested denying visas or canceling visas or revoking them or something for foreigners, foreign nationals that are in the United States that express support for Hamas. This is cancel culture, and it's a Republican doing it, and I think it's stupid. This is the United States. People are free. Well, I'm in Russia, but I'm an American. And, my country, as founded, said in our Constitution, we have freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom to redress the government for grievances, and I can have any opinion that I want to. You may not like it. You don't have to listen to it. Okay? That's why so few people watch my channel. They don't want to listen to it. Fine. But for those who do, welcome. That's great. And if you share it, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. It doesn't matter. I am free to say it. And I'm saying it, and I practice that freedom in Russia about things here. I don't have as much to complain about, but, if I have something to complain about or something to call out, I will say it, and it's no problem. And freedom of speech is valued here probably more highly than it is valued in the US right now, believe it or not. Another story. So, pushing a little closer. This eschatological view of us supporting Israel as being God-pleasing is false. But it is not only false in terms of the eschatology, okay? If we talk about eschatology, the end times, and we're talking about all this idea about supporting the chosen people of God, we're missing a very, very essential point. God can choose his people, and he does. But do they choose him? Do they choose him? Do we choose him? And if you look at the history of Israel, they are a people that constantly um, left that relationship. God never gave up on them, and he has never given up on them, and he never will. And that part is true. But go to Israel, or maybe people who are watching this who have been there, maybe you can tell me about what life is like there. Is it a religious country or is it a secular country? And I know from some people that I know that lived there that were extraordinarily secular. They didn't give two hoots about being Jewish, even though they were. They had no religious interest in anything. And so they lived their life. They partied and did all kinds of stuff. And I found out that the kind of things that people do for a good time in Israel are things that would make a lot of Americans blush. And, everybody looks at us for saying that we are sexually depraved and all that kind of stuff. They say, well, try Israel. Um, and I don't want to say that that's true for everybody in the whole country. There certainly are very, very rigorous and devout religious groups. Some of them are probably closer to the mark than others within Judaism, although Judaism is extremely hard to practice when the time of fulfillment has passed. But there are still people that are um, brought up from the beginning, trained to not believe that Christianity is actually their fulfillment. And you can't really fault them for that. I mean, how are they supposed to know? Somebody needs to go and help them see it. But any of you that, for example, if you look at your own self, whatever religious conviction you hold, um, whenever anybody tries to interfere with it, what is your resistance? I just gave the answer away. What is your reaction? It's probably resistance, anger, defensiveness, fear. Don't mess with my stuff, right? And how much more so when a person is really committed to um, a very rigorous expression of the faith, they will probably be either all for it or all faking it, one way or the other. And sometimes they look both the same because even the people faking it are probably scared to show what they really think, because if they did, they would be kicked out of the community, and the community matters. So, but is Israel a country that is God-fearing? I don't think so. Not as a whole. Is the government of Israel God-fearing? Does anybody know? Can you tell me what Bibi Netanyahu is like, or what the other people in the Likud are like? Maybe some of you can tell me. I don't know. But they seem to have, from the way I view it, they seem to have a rather Nazi perspective on the Palestinians. And I know I get into trouble with this sometimes, but the Israeli government really has no respect for the Palestinian people, because they don't keep their own people from settling in Palestinian territory and then blocking the Palestinian people from going from one place to another within the land that is supposed to be theirs by treaty, by agreement. So this is a problem. And whether that's in West Bank or whether that is in Gaza, I know that somebody made a good correction to me the other day to not associate Hamas with all of Gaza or even all of Palestine, because the real ruling party of the Palestinian territories is Fatah, and Fatah is quite a lot more moderate than Hamas is. Hamas is kind of like the militant wing, if you will. They're a lot tougher on their ideas about what they want to be done. Um, but Fatah is no great fan of Israel, and they certainly complain a lot about the expansionist stuff, but they do it in a more toothless manner. So is Israel a servant of God? I can't see how. If the Jewish people were really serving God, in my opinion, they would not be attacking and making Christians' lives miserable, because they would respect that Christians understand that Israel is a holy site. It's the center, and they would also do the same for Islamic people, because they also see this area as a holy place. And maybe I'm being presumptuous, because also according to Judaic ideals as shown in the Old Testament, they are supposed to tear down idols. And maybe for them a statue of Jesus is an idol. But whatever the case is, um, the Christians report being abused by the IDF and by Jewish authorities quite often. And of course, we know about the Muslims. The Muslims always do it, but the Muslims fight, and the Christians don't, because as Christians, we are taught not to. We're taught to turn the other cheek, and so they just withstand it and in silence, and they say things about it, and the world does not listen to them, especially the geopolitical world, because in most of the geopolitical context, most of the time you don't hear people talk about the the nature of sacred history as it plays out in all of the things that we are doing geopolitically. And this, in particular, with regards to Israel, is absurd, because the the whole premise for the Jewish state existing is eschatological. Okay, it's not geopolitical. Even though there is a geopolitical component, nobody wanted the Jews in their own territory. They said, well, after they liberate them in Germany, where will we send them? Russia didn't want them, apparently, though there is a Jewish autonomous oblast way far in the eastern frontier of Russia. Um, the Americans didn't want them, and so they said, let's send them back to their home. So they worked on that, and now we have Israel. Do they serve God? Doesn't seem to, but more so, the United States, the present government. I'm going to show you some pictures as we're talking. You're going to see pictures of prominent people in the Biden administration. And you look at these pictures as we're sequencing through them, and you ask yourself, do these people look like folks that actually are interested in serving the Lord in any way, any shape or form, any way possible? And I think you're going to come to the same answer that I have. You can't give lip service to the master and expect him to do something. There are certainly people that have a lot of difficulty in their life, with addiction, with whether it's chemical or sexual or whatever. And there are people among these folks that are really struggling, to the best of their understanding and ability, to try to get right with God. I know some of them. I've known some of them, and you can tell when they're doing it. My cousin was homosexual. I never knew it until after he died. I only knew him as, this is a great guy. How come he doesn't seem to ever get married? He's a great guy. He conducted orchestras and choirs and specialized in sacred music. And I think that was his way of trying to get something right, even though he was a partnered homosexual. Had no idea, right? So all this other stuff that's going on now with people mutilating each other, mutilating themselves, because they can't figure out what it means to have what they have between their legs, and so they are dysphoric, um, and can't figure this out. And then we're supposed to indulge them, just like we're supposed to indulge people that want to use mind and mood altering drugs by making marijuana legal all over the whole country. How is this serving God? God does not come to people in a state of inebriation. The Orthodox Church repeatedly talks about the necessity of us as being not just sheep, but rational sheep, people that are capable of thought. capable of reasonable thought. And so you look at this group of pictures that I've just shown you, or that has been sequencing here, and tell me, are these reasonable sheep? Are these people that are interested in any possible way uh, about getting things right with the Lord? And so if they are, great, but most of them aren't. And so they're giving us this line of, quite frankly, BS about supporting Israel under any and all conditions. When the whole foundation of the reason why anybody would want to support a God-fearing country, if it existed, everything is just, it's not there. It's vacant. It's a vacuum. It's an image. There are God-fearing countries in the world. They aren't anywhere like what we might have seen 100 years ago, but there are countries that are trying to center their lives and their national and cultural lives around Christianity. A few of them. Russia is one of them. I think to some extent, I think people from Poland would probably say the same thing about their lives in terms of the Roman Catholic Church. Hungary, Italy, more and more, even though Rome itself is so secularized that I think there was something I read a couple of years ago about that they wouldn't outlaw abortion in Rome, even though the Vatican is right smack dab in the center, you know. So we have these places. Most of the former Soviet republics have experienced a real blossoming of religious faith. Romania, Albania, Bulgaria. Um, Ukraine was on its way, but Ukraine turned away to the Western baubles, and you see what's happening in Ukraine now, where canonically Orthodox people are being persecuted, arrested, prevented from getting on their church sites, or having their churches taken away from them and sometimes destroyed, physically attacked. With uh, you may not see this much, but Tucker Carlson talks about it. I talk about it. Many people talk about it, but the American media doesn't want to talk about it because just like the false mirage of Israel, the Ukrainian, the what do you call it? The Orthodox Church in Ukraine or of Ukraine, whatever you want to call it, Metropolitan Epiphanios, his organization, and I say metropolitan with implied quotes because he's schismatic. It's not really a hierarch of any kind because the church, his so-called church, is not a church that is faithful to God. It is a church that is being used as an instrument of Ukrainian ultranationalism, and nothing else. Maybe that'll change in time. God has a way of working it out, but right now it's being used as an instrument of ultranationalism, and so we could even safely say Naziism, right? So the point of this talk here is to try to get you to think about this. What is real? Think about it for yourself. It doesn't matter to me. I don't think it should matter whether a person, whoever's listening to this, is particularly a devout religious person. We all are blessed with common sense. And even if you don't believe in God, that's fine. He believes in you anyway. Sorry to have to nail you with that a little bit. But a blessing that all of us have is the capability of thinking for ourselves and to use analysis and to just kind of look at things the way they really are. And certainly not to buy the lines of major media, which has really done nothing over the last 4 years or even longer, but especially since 2019. They have been giving us pile after pile after pile of BS, right? Trump, Russia, COVID, COVID vaccine, Ukraine, now Israel, and all the Trump indictments and all that kind of stuff. So it's, for those of us who watch the American press, how long are you going to keep believing the stuff they keep dishing out? It isn't true. Even some of the liberal networks are starting to crack. Even CNN is displaying random acts of journalism now, sometimes pretty good ones. New York Times is sometimes doing it because the truth cannot be concealed forever. Eventually, somebody has to break it, and they do, and then we see this. So, why should we believe now something that a network that has been lying pathologically for years has been doing? Why would there be a change now, especially in the direction that things are going? I named a few specific examples. I could name more. The 2020 election, the 2022 election. All of these things have been tainted with, and actually overwhelmed with massive media efforts to control opinion and to steer people away from any kind of identification of fact and personal analysis of data to come up to your own minds. Look at the headlines for yourself on the Fox News website. You will see example after example after example of what they are saying we are supposed to think and how we are supposed to feel. And nobody has the right to tell you or me or anybody else what we are supposed to think and feel. A news media network is responsible to disseminate information, and that information is supposed to be there ideally for us to analyze. Now, I know that there is no such thing as a biasless news network, including anything that I do. There's always what we might call in the professional world an angle. There is always a perspective. I don't particularly think I have an angle. I don't make enough money to have an angle. Okay, I don't make any money to speak of from doing these videos, maybe a couple of dollars or something once in a while. But I'm doing this because I think that it's important to project a voice out into the wilderness, and maybe a few people hear it, and maybe a few more people hear it, and maybe somewhere it helps somebody to use their own God-given gifts or fate-given gifts, or however you choose to think about it, to analyze the situation for yourself and come up with your own opinion. Okay? So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this broadcast. If you did, please check your subscription. It'd be nice to have some more subscribers. I got a few. Share this with people you know. And maybe if you have an idea, maybe we can come up with a different name for it, since American in Exile seems to have been taken up by at least one or two other folks. I'm open to suggestions. I liked the title, but I guess it's too easy. So anyway, I wish you the best. Please also make sure to follow, I recommend as sources, some of the sources I get from my news, the Duran, which I also write for, Alexander Christoforou, Alexander Mercouris, the editor and chief editor, respectively, of the Duran. Fantastic geopolitical analyst, probably the best in the world. Brian Berletic on the New Atlas site, Dr. Steve Turley in America. All of these guys are fantastic. And I also recommend with a grain of salt, because he's under pressure, Greg Gutfeld. His stuff is wonderful sometimes, and his commentaries, Tyrus, is wonderful. And of course, the last great journalist in the world, in the American world, Tucker Carlson. Please look for anything you can from these guys and compare what they have to say with the other things that you hear, and food for thought. Okay, so this is Seraphim Hanish. I wish you a great day, and hopefully we will talk again soon.